Hi, my name is Steve Bowles, Chair of the South Huron Climate Change Adaptation Advisory Committee. This week's topic is flood protection, which is an issue that is predicted to increase in both severity and frequency as our climate changes in the future. Flood protection is also an issue that is often misunderstood by homeowners and businesses, leading to statements like, "I don't live by the lake, so this can't happen to me," or "I've got great gutters on my home, so I'm safe," or "We never get that much rain around here." Well, we have two great nationally recognized experts in home flood protection here to speak to you today and to address some of those misunderstandings that I was just speaking about. First up is Cheryl Evans, who is the Director of Flood and Wildfire Resilience at the Intact Center, which is a leading research and developer of programs located in Waterloo, Ontario, which focuses on flooding and other issues that impact homeowners. Cheryl's going to talk to you about the increased risk of flood events in Southern Ontario, the impacts of flood events to homeowners, and the role that the Intact Center has in providing education and resources to Canadians about flood protection. And next up will be Larry Freiburger, who is a Director of Operations at AET Group, which is an environmental services company out of Kitchener, Ontario. Larry is also the manager of the Home Flood Protection Program, which has been rolled out nationally across Canada to help communities and homeowners go through an assessment and auditing process to identify risks and action items that they can do to protect themselves from home flood events within their buildings and their community. Larry's going to provide practical measures that can be taken by homeowners and businesses to increase their resilience to flooding events.
Thank you for joining us today. Larry and I will provide a presentation called Simple and Cost-Effective Tips to Protect Your Home from Flooding. We're here to give you information and positive action that you can take to help yourselves. So in terms of the agenda, today we're going to do an overall introduction. We're going to talk about climate change impacts in Canada. We're going to talk about some common flood protection myths and bust those myths. This is from talking to a lot of residents in Canada. And we're going to provide practical tips to protect homes from flooding. And finally, we'll share self-help resources that you can use to help yourself. And to make sure that you want to be in this presentation and attending the presentation, I provided an introductory slide that lets you know all the key things that you'll learn today. So first of all, climate change is real, it is happening, and it will continue to impact Canada. Climate change is contributing to the increasing cost of home flood recovery. Many myths about home flood protection discourage people from taking action to protect their homes from flooding. And we'll bust those myths today. And the best approach to reducing risk is to assess your unique risks, then create an action plan starting with low-cost actions to get you started. You can get started now. And integrating medium and higher cost upgrades into your home renovation plans. And finally, we will have self-help resource links at the end of this slide deck, but also that will be available after the presentation as a handout. Okay, so we'll dive right into a document that was produced by the Government of Canada in 2019. It's called Canada's Changing Climate Report. So it summarized all the best science to give us an idea of what's been happening in Canada and what is to come. So the top three findings are that Canada's climate has warmed and will warm in the future, driven by human influence. Number two, both past and future warming in Canada is on average about double the magnitude of global warming, which is especially tough for our northern communities. And warming is effectively irreversible. And then some of the other key findings that are sort of detailed findings are that the climate impacts for Canada include more extreme heat, less extreme cold, shorter seasonal coverage of snow and ice, melting glaciers and permafrost, and a rise in sea level. And it will intensify certain extremes, such as intense rainfall, and urban flooding. That's heavy rainfall in urban areas that cause flooding, coastal flooding and erosion, severity of heat waves, and risk of drought and forest fire. And I feel like going through this summer in 2021, that everybody can see these on the ground changes manifesting already. So in terms of the growing impacts of flooding, when you look at the information that's been collected by the insurance sector from 1983 to present, what has been happening is there's a growing upward trend on the catastrophic insurable losses due to extreme weather. So a cat loss is a loss that for a one-time event, so for a catastrophic fire or flood, is over $25 million. So the insurance companies as a whole, through Insurance Bureau of Canada, have been collecting this data to track trends over the last 30 years. So from 1983 to 2008, the average amount that insurance companies altogether in Canada would pay out for cat losses was $405 million a year. And then from 2019 to 2018, the curve started arcing upward, and the impacts per year financially are about $1.8 billion a year. That's an old stat. We're closer to $2 billion a year now. So you can see that has almost multiplied by 5 times. So over 50% of those costs of extreme weather are attributed to flooding. And so those are insured losses. The uninsurable losses that are paid by governments and homeowners are about 3 to 4 times this amount. So you can see the upward trend and the upward cause for concern. The impacts of flooding in terms of other impacts beyond money, we'll start with money. The average cost for a homeowner to repair damage caused by basement flooding in Canada in 2018 by Insurance Bureau of Canada was noted at $43,000. And then also, when people have a flood, it's not that they just have a bit of water in the basement. There's often repairs and dealing with insurance companies, dealing with banks to get loans, etc. So in dealing with all of that, the average family loses an average of 7 days of work recovering from a flood. And repeated losses, so flood losses, this increases the likelihood that people will not actually be able to pay their mortgage. Because just think about it, if you have to come up with $43,000, say you don't have adequate insurance coverage, you have to keep paying from somewhere to cover damage in your home. It's very hard to keep up with the mortgage. So it has become a concern for the insurance market, the mortgage market in Canada as well. Okay, so that was all incredibly depressing. What the point of this presentation is to talk about the fact that yes, there are changes coming. We've already seen changes, there are more changes coming, but there are things that residents can do. So this slide talks about, gives into a little bit more detail about why the costs of flooding to homes are on the rise. So there's many things actually that are out of control of residents. There's the changing weather due in part to human-induced climate change. For example, the increasing intensity and frequency of precipitation, higher lake, river, and ocean levels, increasing number of storm surge events, river and coastal erosion. There's also, which I'm sure you've noticed in your own community, there's a lower capacity of essentially the ground to soak up water. We've got undersized and aging municipal infrastructure, so the pipes and ponds that manage our water and make sure it's taken safely away from our homes so that they don't flood. Those are sometimes undersized for the new storm events that are happening. And some of them are leaking and aging as well. And municipalities are trying really hard to keep up with repairs and replacement, but there can be a long wait for adequate repairs. There's also loss of natural infrastructure. I'm sure you've noticed as communities are built, say sometimes forests are replaced, or wetlands or meadows are replaced with hard surfaces, like paving, like house tops, rooftops, sorry. And the other piece that we study in our work at the university is that at the home level, there's an increased cost of flooding because of inadequate home flood protection measures taken directly by residents. So there's a couple of things. Number one, there's an inadequate flood protection features. So sometimes they don't have the most up-to-date devices that might help them reduce the risk. And also many people do not complete maintenance to make sure that the protective devices that they have in their homes are actually working. So this is the area that's under control of homeowners and tenants as well, that they can really sort of think about to understand the risk and take action to reduce their risk. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I know that people are busy. These decisions are complicated, and people use a lot of information that's available to them to make the best decision about what priority actions to take about everything in their lives. So sometimes there are myths that people believe that lead them to think there is no point in making any changes to their homes to protect them from flooding. So I'm going to go through some of those myths to clear up some of that information and then provide some resources for additional information. So we at University of Waterloo, we developed a home flood risk assessment protocol, and AET has delivered over 750 assessments across Canada. So one of the things we've been hearing a lot from people were that they don't need to worry. In other words, they don't need to do anything because they've never been flooded before. So the reality is, because the climate is changing and our cities are changing with more hard surfaces, it turns out that the past is not actually any longer a good predictor of the future. So changing weather, land use changes around you, and equipment failure at your home may put you at risk of flooding. The other one that's, I think, the most common myth is my house won't flood because I'm not near a river or a lake or an ocean. So the reality is that all Canadian homes are at risk of flooding from faulty plumbing and appliances, from sewer backup, and from heavy rainfall. That's all homes. And roughly 5% of Canadian homes face additional flood risk from rivers, lakes, and oceans. And what those additional risks include are things like erosion of soils and more structural damage from, say, wave action or movement of rivers, so more severe impacts. But everyone in Canada is at risk of flooding from these basic things like plumbing and fixtures, sewer backup, and heavy rainfall. So I was able to find a pamphlet from Intact Insurance. There are many different insurance companies that are obviously providing this type of information, but I want to give you it as an idea of what data they are finding, what claims they're actually noticing. So this is a really interesting one. 60% of all flood-related claims are from faulty appliances and plumbing leaks. So if you're thinking about prioritizing flood protection, honestly, start with indoor appliances and plumbing. Make sure they're working and will protect you. Number two, 25% of losses are from heavy rainfall. 11% is from sewer or sump pump backup. So these are all different types of flooding that can affect homes in different ways. Number three, I don't have to do anything because I have insurance. Ooh, that's a common one. Okay, so the reality is you may not be covered by your insurance, depending on how water gets into your home and if you can prove that you've been doing preventative maintenance. because most comprehensive home insurance policies only cover flooding caused by sudden and accidental escapes of water from plumbing and appliances. So for example, if it is not sudden and accidental, if the insurance company can prove you've had a little drip, a little leak, they may deny you coverage because it's your responsibility actually to do regular maintenance. The other thing is that the plumbing and appliances, obviously because it's 60% of losses, that is covered as a core policy coverage for all comprehensive policies, but the other types of flooding are not typically covered, and you have to purchase additional policies, additional coverages. Now, not every home is available, has access to these policies. It's all depending on the house and where you live and your claim history. But you have to purchase additional policy coverage for sewer backup flooding and overland flooding. So that means water flowing over the ground. And I just wanted to give you an example of this poor guy named Robert Deeks. He's from Burlington, Ontario. There was a very big flood in 2014. They got 2 months of rain in about a day. So the streets filled up, the pipes couldn't take away the water quickly enough. So this guy had insurance coverage for sure for leaking pipes, but he wouldn't necessarily have insurance coverage for the other types of water entry into his home. So he had water pouring through cracks in his windows and doors. That's considered overland flooding for insurance. So if he didn't have that, wouldn't be covered. Overflowing from his sump pit. If he didn't have sewer backup coverage, he would not be covered. And it was back up through the toilets and drains. If you didn't have a sewer backup coverage, that wouldn't be covered either. So it just gives you a really good example of some of the challenges. Now, the good news is that through homefloodprotect.ca, our website, we have lots of practical resources to help people understand insurance basics and have a really good chat with their insurance company, and to help them shop around too, because every company offers different things and it's really important to shop around. The next myth is a very common one, and I thought this too when I was a tenant. It's I do not need insurance at all because I'm a tenant. And also, I'm not going to purchase something I don't need if it's going to cost me money, and it's expensive to buy insurance. So the reality is that landlords are not required to cover tenant expenses in the event of a flood. So the good news is that tenant insurance coverage is available to anyone. It's usually about $25 to $30 a month. And tenants are responsible for buying insurance to cover the replacement of their damaged belongings and to pay for a place to stay while the rental unit is being repaired. That's a big one. If your home floods because of sewer backup or a pipe burst, surprisingly, you won't have payment from your landlord for anywhere to stay. So this would help cover that. And sometimes repairs can cost weeks or even a month. So it's really important to speak to your insurance company and remember to shop around to find the best coverage for you. Okay, and the last myth I'm going to cover is flood protection is not worth investing in. So a lot of people have a lot of difficulty, first of all, even thinking about where they would start with home flood protection. There's a lot of information and they get a bit confused, but overall, they think that it's too expensive, it's not worth it, not going to bother, right? It's an active decision. So the reality is, the research that we did at over 700 homes indicated that the most common flood risks can be addressed with seasonal maintenance activities. They're boring, they're repetitive. We just need you to create sort of a checklist and make it part of your seasonal routine. Things like cleaning out your eaves troughs, checking your sump pump like this lady's doing, checking out and cleaning your backwater valve on a regular basis. Those things are all basically free. And they're one of the most important things you can do to protect your home. And remember, they're critical to help you maintain insurance. The other thing that we noted is that taking a logical approach that has you do really simple upgrades by going to the hardware store, like extending your downspouts or putting plastic covers over your window wells. That's the next step. You know, this is logical. And then beyond that, if you are still having a little bit of challenge with your flooding, you can go work with professionals to determine if some of the more expensive options are important for you to take on. So that is the end of my session. I've talked a lot about sort of what the challenges are, what some of the basic opportunities are to help yourself. But Larry, whose team has led the on-the-ground implementation of the home flood protection assessments and has helped homeowners and tenants personally to identify flood risks and come up with practical action plans that can help themselves. Larry's going to do the next section to give you lots of details about how you can understand your risks and how you can help yourself. Thank you. Take it away, Larry.
Thank you, Cheryl. And hello, everyone. I want to discuss some of the protection items that we're going to look at. Really, the basic of home flood protection is to keep the water away from your building, to keep the water out, and if the water gets in, remove it quickly. Also, to reduce risk of damage, select flood-resistant storage options for your items, flood-resistant furniture, and flood-resistant building material. And remember that prevention actions can reduce, but do not eliminate risk of flooding or damage. There's 3 steps to cost-effective home flood protection, and I'm going to talk about those a little later. But I just want to summarize. It's a logical step approach to addressing most common home flood risks. In the short term, we're going to discuss the completion of simple, low-cost maintenance and simple upgrades. And in the long term, we're going to talk about completing more complex upgrades after evaluating options with the support of qualified professionals, government, and insurance representatives. Number 6, once I've installed my flood protection features like a backwater valve, a backup sump pump, or a backup power source for my sump pump, I'll be done. My home will be fully protected. In reality, all flood protection features require general maintenance to ensure that they will be working when I need them. Taking action can reduce, but not eliminate, the risk of floods that will occur. Just some of the steps that you want to do over the course of 2 years, like once at the beginning of the year, once at the end. And these are self items that you can do. They should be completed in the spring and in the fall primarily. And remember that these things are very simple, like cleaning debris away from your storm drain that's close to your home, keeping your eave troughs clean, checking for leaks on plumbing fixtures or appliances, test your sump pump, and keeping your backwater valve clean. If you're an owner or a landlord, you need to remember that regular maintenance is required to qualify for homeowner coverage. And if you're a tenant, you could consider removing debris from the storm drains and complete other maintenance actions that you can do if it's an agreement with your landlord. Step number 2, these are also things that you can do, such things like installing window well covers, extending your downspouts, storing your valuables in containers that are waterproof and tight, and securing your fuel tank. Remove obstacles from the storm drain, and install and maintain flood alarms. Most installations that I've just mentioned can be done by yourself and by a hardware store supply. And tenants, remember to store your valuables and remove obstructions to the floor drain. Note that any physical changes that are be done to the home must be authorized by the owner or the landlord. And step number 3, these are more complex and in some cases require the support of professionals or government. There's such things as installing window wells. There are things like disconnecting your downspouts from drains and extending it away. Completing grading to extend the water to flow away from your house. Install backwater valves and install backup sump pumps and backup power supplies. You remember to work with experts that are insured contractors and obtain references from them. Attain required permits such as for things for plumbing and for grading, and look for financing from municipal subsidies and from flood insurance discounts. You can complete a free home flood protection checkup, something that can be done very easily. You can find it online. And a home flood checkup is free, it's confidential, it's a visual inspection for a home flood risk assessment. And it's a tool that was developed by the Intech Center for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. It looks at 15 of the most common risks to homes, and it's applicable in all of Canadian homes. It does not include the risk posed by river or coastal flooding. It's very simple. It's available in both English or in French. Just select the appropriate link. Then identify if you're an owner or a tenant. Take 5 to 10 minutes to answer a series of yes and no questions about flood risk inside and outside the home, and have a confidential custom home flood protection report emailed to you or downloaded on your device. You can also consider having a home flood assessment. There are 2 options for that. There's an on-site assessment and a remote assessment. The on-site assessment will take 60 to 90 minutes. An assessor will visit the home, conduct a visual assessment of the property, outside and in. A detailed report will be prepared and will be available in 1 to 2 weeks. And an optional 15-minute follow-up conversation with an assessor is also available. The remote assessment option is 60 minutes in length, and residents use the Home Flood Protection Program's mobile picture app to take and submit photos of required features that are presented on the app. A teleconference is scheduled between the assessor and the residents, and a detailed report, again, will be available within 1 to 2 weeks, and an optional 15-minute follow-up conversation with the assessor will also be available. For more information, connect to the link below and to see how you can have an assessment done at your home. There's also self-help resources that are available at www.homefloodprotect.ca. They cover such things as flood protection fact sheets and how-to videos, home flood protection checkups, home flood protection assessments, flood insurance literacy information, and shareable social media content can be found on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Also remember that there's watershed alerts available. Conservation authorities across Ontario use flood messages or bulletins to alert municipal flood coordinators and other agencies throughout their watershed when flooding is possible or about to occur. Stay informed, subscribe to flood alerts. Members of the general public have access to these alerts through subscribing to their local conservation authority's website or following them on social media. Thank you for your time. You could reach Cheryl Evans or myself, Larry Freiburger, at the links below. Have a great day.